Welcome to our podcast that's brought to you by the Southern African Institute of Government Auditors, and we talk about issues relating to accountability, transparency, good governance, and of course, all in aid of improving performance of the public sector. And this time around, we're going to look at a current matter that has been before the courts, and I invited the Director of Government Studies, Professor Kedibone Phago, of the University of Northwest to be our guest and to take a look at this matter. It's a relatively unusual type of case, and it ended up going to the Supreme Court of Appeal. And recently, they effectively, that is the SCA, dismissed an appeal against an order of the Eastern Cape Division of the High Court, Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan Municipality. And this is a case that involves several officials who were employees of the municipality who were found to have engaged in some corrupt practices, and the municipality was suing them for huge amounts of money, and this is as a result of a new law that was passed recently. It's an unusual case. Prof, thank you very much for joining us. And tell us, why is this a rare and unusual case, and why are we focusing on it, or should pay attention to this case?
Good afternoon, Pratim. Thank you for having us here. It's quite an honor to really be talking to you on this platform, and also trying to engage the people who deal with this on a day-to-day basis, those who are auditing government. So what we have observed in the outcome of this ruling is that it is very clear, and it's quite interesting, as you say, that it is unusual. But if we look into the merits of what the judge has actually said, you will see that this should have been a norm. So I think this judge has actually demonstrated something that is very interesting to us, that we need to go back to our Municipal Finance Management Act and try to make sure that officials, politicians, whoever is involved in running the affairs of our local government, that they follow their fiduciary duties, and that they make sure they protect the finances. So what looks like happened here in this particular case is that the municipal officials that were involved in the tendering processes did not follow the processes or that are required by law in these particular instances. And it is in this case that it was found that they were fruitless expenditure, they were wasteful expenditure, and this is why the judge, so the municipality pursued this case against its own employees, and even take it through this appeal. And it looks like the judge agreed with the municipality that these officials need to pay back the money because they did not follow the basic processes that need to be followed when they do the tendering.
Well, the argument, I think, many times is made that when people are caught to be in the wrong, or to have engaged in an irregular practice of awarding tenders irregularly, or even helping themselves to public funds, that it is a loss that is taken by the particular entity, and that the individuals or officials concerned are never pursued. Why was this the case in this particular instance, that they were pursued in their personal capacity?
Look, Bratim, and I think this is an important conversation we need to engage even more on who should really be on the lookout and watching our governance processes. In other words, when these transactions happen, who should be able to give us a hint on whether processes are followed, or they are actually found to be wanting. It appears that municipality did its own due diligence. And I think the major factor here could be the fact that we actually have had a coalition government in Nelson Mandela Bay. So it looks like the system of accountability works better when we've got members of council coming from the different political parties. So it seems in this particular instance, and it is very clear that these officials were able to, that the council, the municipality was able, obviously based on the audit reports, to demonstrate that there is a case here that needs to be pursued, and that people who were um, made to be responsible for protecting the finances of the municipalities were actually in cohoot with businesses that were trying to do transactions with the municipality, and even found some ways of doing kickback. So I think this is a very classic case that tells us that perhaps our a new political landscape in South Africa that gives us the coalition government system, even with its weaknesses, seems to give us, a direction that could bring back the days of good governance, accountability, transparency in the manner in which our governance is run.
So, for officials who operate in the spaces of supply chain management, what is it that they should take note of given this ruling by the Supreme Court of Appeal?
Look, Bratim, the first thing that we need to really preach as much as possible to our officials in government and even politicians is that we need to professionalize our public sector system across the board. So we need to have people who have a sense of what it is to operate in this landscape, because essentially it is to be a public servant. And so they are given huge responsibilities of protecting and using our public funds. So it is on that basis that they need to understand that if they are found to be using these resources to benefit themselves, to benefit their friends and families, that we will find ways of making sure that there is pressure that is put. And I think having the reports from the Auditor General, having reports, this kind of a court outcome sends a good message to say our systems, even if they are not optimal, but sometimes they work. And if you are found to be wanting and using these resources to benefit yourself, you will be exposed. And I think just this level of exposure is quite significant in our body politic.
Well, we're discussing the Supreme Court of Appeal ruling recently that found employees of the Gqeberha Municipality, Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan Municipality, to be liable for irregular expenditure, a total amount of 7.638,177 rands in terms of Section 32 of the Local Government's Municipal Finance Management Act 56 of 2003, MFMA. And now the court says they have to pay back that money in their personal capacities. Are we likely to see more cases of this nature being taken to court?
We should, Bratim, because there are dynamics at play here. But what we have seen is that the many of our public institutions are bleeding their resources precisely because the officials work with their business partners, work with their family members to flout our supply chain management processes. And this has reached, crisis proportions. And I think if we are able to get these kinds of message from the courts, especially where there is some clear evidence. And I think we've seen a lot of evidence that came and that keeps coming through the Office of the Auditor General that has been seeing, a lone voice in the system. And to have courts come into party and say, we will join this song of the Auditor General really sends some good message for our public officials that they need to prioritize service delivery. They need to prioritize the health of our public institutions that they need to prioritize our committees.
Now, who is responsible for taking matters such as these to court? Is it the Auditor General's office? Is it members of the public? Would it be the council itself, or would it be NGOs out there that are paying particular attention to these types of developments?
Look, my view, Bratim, is that we are South Africans. We live in a democracy. And I think any of us who are privy to these kind of processes should be required to stand up and take this matter up to the court of law. And because we also have our accountability systems in place. So basically, when the Auditor General rings a bell that there is a problem here, we should all be standing up as councils, as NGOs, as the civil society, as academia, to say that we need to see the levels of accountability getting improved, because if we don't do this, down the line we're going to lose these precious institutions of ours that are helping to provide basic services for the people.
Prof, please tell me a bit more about the implications of this. Are we going to see a reversal of the negative reports that we've heard about and we've read coming from the Auditor General's office about irregular expenditure and money that is not accounted for, that's not properly accounted for, etc., etc., and this runs into billions of rands. Now that the courts have given direction in this regard, are we likely to see more cases being taken to court? And are we likely to see a reversal of the wrong practices or irregular practices that we've been seeing coming from the different government departments and municipalities?
Indeed, Bratim, I think that is what we hope to see. We hope to see a functional public sector. We hope to see municipalities that use their resources to prioritize their people. It's a complex environment, Bratim, because it's not only about corruption, but it's also about unspent funds. So it talks about skills shortage. It talks about institutional capacity to deliver service. So there are a range of issues, but I think this is an important spanner in the works, just to make sure that whoever is going to be playing in that space would be ensuring that we prioritize the municipal functioning, we prioritize public service delivery, we prioritize citizens, and that we do not continue to ignore or even intentionally violate the supply chain management processes. So it is indeed a very important ruling that would, I hope it would serve as a deterrent to those who come to the public sector to enrich themselves.
Just finally, your comments, if you were to make such to an official who works with public finances, not only those who are in the supply chain divisions of the different municipalities, but those who work with public finances, what is it that they should learn from this ruling?
I think it sends a very good message that we need a conscientious public servant whose priorities are public service. We need to send a very clear message to our public servants, municipal officials, politicians, that this is about ensuring that our local government environment is optimized. This is to ensure that we serve in a highly ethical and a professional environment. And it can only happen when we follow our own rules, when we make sure that the priority that comes to the fore when we meet with one another in our various platforms within the local government space, it's really to find a way of improving municipal service delivery. Pratim, if you move around our various municipal spaces, I mean, we find a lot of potholes. We find malfunctioning, street lights. the parks are not maintained, it tells you that there is a rot in our midst, and we need institutions, we need ways and means that are going to help us to root this rot out so that we are able to maintain a prosperous and a forward moving South Africa that is developmental and that is able to meet the needs of its citizens. So whenever we've got this kind of rotten potatoes amongst us, they really frustrate these kinds of developmental agendas that we would love to see championed by our government, especially at the local government sphere. Thank you, Bratton.
Professor Kedibone Phago, the Director of School of Government at the University, or Northwest University rather, my guest, and thanks very much for sharing with us your thoughts on the ruling by the Supreme Court of Appeal, a matter between the employees of the Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality and their employer, the city itself, and they were found to have awarded irregular tenders to the tune of more than 7 million rands, and that money is now going to be retrieved from them. They have been found to be liable for the losses that were suffered by the city. Now, this podcast is brought to you by Southern African Institute of Government Auditors, and the whole point of it is to bring guests on the show, on the podcast, to share with us their insights, their views on how we can improve accountability, transparency, governance, and of course, performance. Once again, Prof, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Bratim. Thank you so much for the time
Sure.
we spent together here. Sure.